on from our little tax calculator. Here was the code we wrote. It gets triggered when our user clicks the calculate button. And Ryan asked a good question about hitting the enter button. So I put in an amount here. So the issue was you want it so that when I hit the enter key, it clicks the button. Let's see, right? When I click enter on my keyboard, nothing happens. Now, there is a way. Notice that my text box, when I type in it, it's got that blue border in it. So if I hit the tab key, now the focus is on my button. Now I can hit enter and it actually runs. Let's see if there's actually a property that I can get it without clicking, without having to hit the tab key. We'll take a look and see for a minute. We may or may not be able to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my button and I'm going to look. There may be a property here that we can set that will allow us to automatically, let's see if there's a property we can set. There may be, there may not be. Maybe on our text box, let's see if there's something we can do here.
Accepts returns.
Yeah, let's look at that accepts returns. I think, so let's see, it actually gives us a description here. It says, indicates if return characters are accepted as input for multi-line controls. So that's a good guess, but what that means is if we made that box tall, that we could type paragraphs and return would put line breaks in. So I don't think that's what we want. So it doesn't look like we have that ability baked in.
You want to try? It's the button property.
Okay, which property should we try?
Accept button.
Sorry, this is on the button?
Yeah, it's on button and it starts on 8, the first one, the very first one.
Yep.
Yeah, in data binding. Yeah. After name.
After name, I've got accessible.
Before accessible description, I'm getting here accept button.
You have accept button on yours?
I'll show you.
Okay.
It's right here. So it was none before, and I just calculate and then run it.
Ah, okay. So it's actually a property of our form. Thank you for that. If I click on the form itself, thanks very much for that. Notice here on my tax calculator form, under accept button, I can pick calculate. So that's telling the form if there's multiple buttons, we can try that and see if it works. That may work when we hit enter. We'll try it. So again, I click the form, or you could just select the form down here as tax calculator, and I chose the accept button. Let's try it. So now I type something in. And notice, yeah, notice the button's already highlighted. I didn't have to hit tab. It's already got the blue selection around it. So now when I hit enter, that works. So in effect, if we have a whole bunch of buttons on our page, we can designate one of them as the default button for that screen. So it's actually a property of our form to set an accept button. Thanks for that. Good tip. So very good question. Good job solving the problem. Okay, so in our form property, we can set any button as our accept button. It basically means our default button. That's what will get triggered by the enter key if we want. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to give you another example, another little screen to build. Okay. So I'm going to right-click my project, my lesson 3, and choose Add Windows Form. And I'm going to call this one Grade Average. .cs. So here's what has to happen on this form. I'm going to explain what happens. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and just build the whole thing yourself. If you want to build it along with me, that's fine too. Okay, again, we'll write the comments out. We'll write our pseudocode. We'll draw a little flow chart, and then we'll write the code. So typically in a semester here at Georgian, if you're a full-time student, you take 6 courses. So all we want this page to do is we want an input for a student to be able to enter their 6 grades in each course. They should be able to click a button and get a display of what their grade average, their overall grade average is. So we're going to have 6 inputs. We're going to do 1 calculation, generate and display 1 output. Okay. So we could design, put everything on our user interface first. What are we going to need? If you think about the inputs, the processing, and the output, what are all of the controls we're going to need on this page? What things will we actually need to see visually? Okay, so we might need the names of the classes. Yeah, we'll need 6 input boxes, so we'll need 6 text boxes. What else will we need? We'll need a button. Yeah, and we'll need a label to display the output. So why don't we design our... Actually, you know what? I'm going to draw another flow chart here. So I'll make a new diagram. So then we'll put on we'll want an input, 1 input for each of our 6 courses. We'll want to calculate the average of those 6 numbers. And then we'll just display that average to the screen. So that's what our program's got to do. Now keep in mind, if we've got 6 text boxes, again, we're going to need to perform math. So what are we going to have to do with those 6 inputs in order to calculate the average? Yeah, we're going to have to convert them all. Probably we can use integers. You're going to use whole numbers in this case. And then we're going to need to total those 6 numbers up, divide them by 6, and then what will we need to do in order to display them?
Create a new variable for your GPA.
Yeah, and then we're going to have to convert it back to a string so we can display it in a label. So this is kind of our workflow. I'll export this one as well. I'll put this on Blackboard after. So let's go back to Visual Studio. So you'll want to add 6 text boxes to your form. If you want to put labels beside them with the course names or course code, you could. You don't have to. So we'll need 6 text, at minimum, 6 text boxes, 1 button, and 1 label. So our 6 text boxes represent our input, our button triggers our processing, and our label will be used for displaying the average. So we've got our blank screen here. I'll go to my toolbox. So I'll just drag put on a button.
You could always label your courses inside the actual.
Sure, we could do that. That's actually, we'll look at how to do that. We can put placeholders in those text boxes. That's a good idea. Then we don't need 6 labels over here. So why don't we just put in, we'll name these boxes. So by default, they're named text 1, 2, text box 2, text box 3. Not great names. So let's call these, let's name these after our courses. So our first one we can call TXT 1030. That's this course. So what other courses do we have this semester? I think that's 1051. So I'll call the second one TXT 1051. You've got, I think, COMP1002. So that can be our third box. We've got 1030, 1051, 1002. What are your other course codes this semester? $10.51. So our fourth box I'll call 1051. $1,002. Whoops, I already had 1051. I think 1051. I think you have 1051 and 1054 or 1053. You can see them on Blackboard. 54? Sorry?
There's 53, 51, 02, and 30.
Okay, so this one is TXT 1053. Now your other courses, are they comms and gen ed? So probably everyone has different ones. Com course and one gen ed course. So there, we'll make our fifth box, we'll just call it TXT com. I'll put com in all caps. And our last one will be TXT GNED. So we could set the default text in each one. So on my first one, we'll put the text in as 1030. So when the page loads, the user knows to type 1030 in that box. My second one, the text property is 1051. The third one is 1002. The fourth one is 153. Fifth one says COM. And the last one. So this is, we're basically prompting the user. So they'll just override these text values.
What if you didn't have one of those? Could you leave it blank, or would you put a 0 and would it calculate the 0 as and bring the average down?
Good question. So if we didn't have one of those, well, we probably wouldn't want to include a 0, yeah, because if it was a 0, that might mean, no, I'm taking the course, but I got 0. When we did the calculate, what we'd probably actually want to do is check each value, whether there's a number in there. Is there a number in this box, yes or no? And then we'd have to keep track of how many courses are there. We won't do that just for simplicity, but in a more advanced calculator, we probably want to do that. In this case, we'll assume we have 6 courses, just to keep it simple. Let's change our button. We'll call our button, instead of calling it calculate, we'll be more specific that it's a button. We'll call this one BTN calculate. So that's the name of the button, and the text on our button, it can say calculate. And then I'll click on label 1, and we'll change this to the name to be LBL average. And maybe we'll change the default text on here. It can just say average with a colon. So this is what our form will look like when the user loads it. So we've given them each input, we've given them a way to trigger the processing, and we've created a space to display an output. Now we want to change our project, so when we press the play button, it now loads this form, not our tax calculator. So where do we need to go to do that? Yeah, we'll go to our program.cs. We already have it open from before. And now I'll change my code, so instead of loading the tax calculator, it loads grade average instead. We want that to now be our startup screen. Later on, we could build a menu or buttons that allow us to navigate one screen to another. For now, we'll just change the startup.
That's really user friendly.
So if we press play, we can't do anything with our form yet. But that's what it looks like. So we'll take out the course codes and we'll type in we want to be able to put in those numbers. Right now, when I click calculate, nothing happens because we haven't written any C# code. That button doesn't do anything yet. You can click it as many times as you want, nothing's going to happen. And our average doesn't change. So now we want to write the code that's going to happen, that's going to occur when our user clicks the calculate button. So if I just double click my button, we'll get our code window. So before we write the C# code, let's put the comments in already. Let's put in what will happen. So what's the first thing we want to do when the user clicks our calculate button? We'll assume we got 6 numbers. We won't worry about checking today for invalid inputs. We'll just assume they gave us 6 grade numbers that are between 0 and 100. What should we do first? Sure, so let's collect and convert. We'll say collect inputs, convert to double, and store as variables. So we'll create 6 variables and each one will represent one of our grades. Now we can't start a variable with a number, so I can't call my variables 1030, 1002, not able to do that. So we'll maybe just call it, so we'll create a double. And I'll call it maybe grade 1030. It's a good descriptive name. So this is going to come from my txt 1030. Take the text that was entered in our 1030 box and store it as a variable called 1030. Why do I have a red line? Yeah, we have to convert it into a double. It's a text value or a string. So we'll use the same function we've used before, convert it to a double. Our red line goes away. So take that value, convert it to a double, and store it in memory called grade 1030. If we want to save ourselves the trouble, we could just copy that line 6 times and change I'm doing this to save time and to be efficient. We have to be really careful when we copy and paste code, because often we copy it and paste it, but we don't make all the changes we need to. Right? Why am I getting a red line under all these other ones? What does this mean? Yeah, we can't create 1030 again and again. We've already created it up here. So now we've got 1051, 1050. How do you copy? Just highlight it. You can either right click and choose copy, or you can click the edit menu and copy, or you can just press Control C and then Control V to paste. All of them will work. So then I have my COM grade. So now we have 6 numeric values, each one that holds a grade. We did these as doubles. We probably could have done them as integers. We're allowing decimal places if the user happens to type in my, my grade is 80.5. So that's step 1. We've taken all 6 of the inputs, we've converted each one to a number, and we stored each one in a variable with a descriptive name.
But for example, banner grades don't have any
No,
decimals.
that's
So-
true. We could have used integer for them if we wanted to. So if you prefer to use integer, so decimals get ignored, just change these to int32. So we've got 6 numbers, and now we want to calculate the average. So we probably need one more variable. What would be a descriptive name for that variable? We want to calculate. Yeah, let's call it average. Do you want to allow numbers or decimals, or are we going to just have whole numbers only? Okay, so again, we'll use double. Now I get this. So we want to set average. So how do we set the average?
Like doing it with all the various grades and then like adding one together and then just dividing by 6.
Right, we got to add these 6 numbers together and divide by 6. So I'm going to put in round brackets because we have to add the numbers first. So we're going to add grade 1030. We're just going to add these 6 variables together. And lastly, we're going to divide by 6. So now we'll know what the grade average is. So we've handled our inputs, we've done our processing, so we only have one more thing to do, which is what? Yeah, we just have to display the outputs back to the screen. So we put a label on there, Alex.
Is there a difference between double and double written with big or small letter? Because the color is different on the
They're in effect the same thing used 2 different ways. Okay, the answer is a bit complicated. One is a type and one is an object, a bit beyond the scope of today's lesson. Yeah, use it this way, capital. So now we'll take our average label. How do we put that value into the label? What do we want to do with that average label? Yeah, we'll set the text property. We'll take our average variable. We're calculating the average and we're putting it back on our screen. But we also have to convert it back to a string. So grab our 6 inputs, store them in memory as numbers, perform our math, get our value back, send it back to the page. Let's run this and see what happens. So if we type in three numeric values, and calculate, there's our average. And we know it's calculating correctly. My math isn't great, but it's good enough to know my average here is 85. Right, if I try any other combination, I put in all the same. Obviously, my average better show is 50, or my program's gone wrong somewhere. So we're really just doing inputs, a little processing, and some output. Question? Pardon me? Yes, but you need 50.
Yeah, but you need a 60 minimum for your
Yeah.
average.
In any class, you need a minimum of 50, but you need an average of 60 to go from one semester to another.
And over.
Okay. So, well, this class is the foundation for all the other development classes in the program, right? So we start at the very basic level. But remember we talked about last week, I said, remember, if you picked up an instrument for the first time, if I put a guitar in your hands and you've never played guitar, and I showed you a couple things, probably not going to sound like music today. It may not sound like music next week either, right? But it's the repetition. The more we do it, the more things start to suddenly make sense and become natural, right? Whenever we learn any skill at the beginning, there's the odd person who's just natural and it just comes, but it's not usually like that for most people. So that's fine. If you feel a little out of sorts, like, wow, I'm not really sure what's going on. How am I going to be able to do this? That's okay. Don't freak out. I don't expect that everybody by week 2 thinks, oh, this is super easy. No problem. Okay. You're learning. Okay. And typically the way we learn stuff is we hit bumps. It's hard at first, then we get it, then we hit other bumps. That's fine. It's normal. Don't panic. Okay. The only way you won't learn it though is if you don't actually do it. Like anything else, playing guitar, you have to have that guitar in your hands to get better at it. You have to code. So that's why when you come to class every week, you need to open your laptop, and I encourage you to be doing this stuff along with me. Even if you fall behind and you don't get all of it, it's better than not doing it at all. Because if you don't do it, it's never going to get easier. Okay, so that brings me to your lab. Okay. So you do have a lab. I'm going to make the lab due tomorrow night at midnight. Okay, so you have a day and a half to do it. So all of the assignments in this class, they're under the tab called assignments. So under lab 1, I've actually shown you what the lab's going to look like. So you can read the instructions. So here's what you have to do. Okay. I want you to make a brand new application. Don't create this inside of the application we did today. Okay? Because I want you to get the experience of creating a new project. So go to in Visual Studio, go to File, New Project. Choose a Visual C# Windows application. And again, if you forgot how to do it, you can go back and watch part 1 of today's video. It'll automatically generate a Form 1 for you. That's fine. You can just use that default form. You don't have to build another screen. Okay. So this is a simple calorie calculator. So we're going to need 3 inputs. There are your inputs, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can put labels on beside them if you want. You don't have to. There'll be a calculate button. And when the user clicks calculate, you have to calculate and display 2 outputs. how many total calories did they eat that day, and what was the average number of calories they ate in a meal, right? So for the total, you're just going to add those three numbers together and display the total. And for the average, you'll take the total and divide it by 3. Okay? There is nothing in this lab we didn't do today. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. And also I want to come, Max actually asked, how do you submit this?
Well, I was asking, is it or?
Yes. So I will show you how to do it. Okay? So there's your lab. That's what it should look like. So once you have this working, to submit your project, all you have to do is go into wherever you've saved the project. And again, if you're using the default location on your computer, it will just be inside Documents, Visual Studio 2015, and Projects. You create the project, call it Lab 1, and it'll create a folder called Lab 1 for you. So all you need to do is this. I'll actually put all my code I did today. I'm going to put it on Blackboard for you right now. So I'll show you how to zip it up for those of you who don't know how to do it. Some of you do know, and some of you won't. So this lesson 3 folder, so this is my Visual Studio project I did today. Okay. So all you need to do is right click on the folder. So you'll have a folder called Lab 1, right click it, and you should just be able to add it to lab1.zip. So some of you know what zip is, some of you don't. It's a compression tool. So it takes a whole bunch of files and makes them smaller.
Some people have to install 7-zip.
Yes, 7-zip. If you don't have it, it's a free utility, but you should even be able to do it in Windows now. In old versions, you had to install it. In Windows, you should actually be able to zip right from Windows. So I'll create it as a zip file. And notice it makes it really small. It's only 63 kilobytes. So then on Blackboard, to submit your assignment, if I just go back here, whoops. If you just click on Lab 1, just click Browse My Computer, go into the folder where your zip file is, and upload it. Okay, so you're just zipping the entire thing that Visual Studio creates. And then down here is your submit button. So it will upload your code. So the way that I'll mark it is I have a section in Blackboard. I can see all the assignments that need grades. I'll click on your assignment. I'll download it to my computer. I'll extract it. I'll open it up in Visual Studio and I'll try your calculator out. I'll put in some different numbers. Click the calculate button and see whether your program shows me the average and the total number of calories. Okay, it's worth 2.5%. You have until tomorrow night at midnight to submit it. So I will change the due date until tomorrow night. Okay, so we're going to do 5 of these labs. Each one's worth 2.5%, and I'll count your best 4. But I would encourage you to do all of them because it's good practice for you. And the more you practice, the better you get at this and the easier it gets. Okay, so that's it for today. Anything you want to see from today's